Good morning, and thanks for tuning in. We're going to continue our series on setting the stage. This morning we'll be in Mark chapter 15, and we'll start in verse 6 and go through verse 39. So once again, just thank you for joining us. And one thing that we've kind of missed out not being face-to-face is prayer requests. And I still believe that that's very important. So if you have a prayer request, you're watching the video, just comment below your prayer request. If it's something personal, just put unspoken, and I'll make sure that I'm going through and checking those so I can be praying for you specifically. So thank you again for that, and thank you for bearing with us through all the technical difficulties that we've had, but we think we've got it now. So setting the stage, we're continuing in week 3, which is understanding the crucifixion. Now there's a lot of things that happened in the crucifixion I don't believe everybody understands, and one of those being when Jesus cries out to God, and then we're going to get to that, and I can't wait to explain that, because that's like number one question that I get asked about the crucifixion is, if he was God, then why would he have to cry out, or why would God abandon him? But what we forget sometimes is that God is always setting the stage for his movement and his plan, and his will be done. So in that, our first point today is, what do we choose? And what do we choose? In verse 6, it starts off, it says, "At the festival, Pilate used to release for the people a prisoner whom they requested." They had this, and he would always release one prisoner to them who they thought usually wasn't the worst prisoner. He really doesn't deserve to be in there any longer. Let's let him go, like a governor's pardon. And technically, you could actually still say that, a governor's pardon. So there was one named Barabbas who was in prison with rebels who had committed murder during the rebellion. Now, it doesn't specifically say that he was a murderer, but he ran with rebels who committed murder during the rebellion. So there's leads one to believe that Barabbas was also a murderer himself. It says the crowd came up and began to ask Pilate to do for them as was his custom. So Pilate answered them, "Do you want me to release the King of the Jews for you?" Now that was his thought process through this, is they've come and asked me to release one prisoner because they want me to release the King of the Jews, right? Not quite. So it continues in verse 10. It says, "For he knew it was because of envy that the chief priests had handed him over." He knew that Jesus had done nothing wrong. He knew it was only because of the envy of the chief priests that he had even been handed over to him. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd. So not only he knew that it was just the priests that had something against him, that they were pushing for him to be crucified. He knew that, but he had to go with the word of the people to keep his political position. And we see that a lot in today's world, where political parties are sometimes pushing their own political, whatever their agenda is, upon people. But first you have to get the people involved to make them see as if it was their idea, or if it would benefit them, right? So that's exactly what the chief priest did. But the chief priest stirred up the crowd so that he would release Barabbas, right? They stirred him up to them instead. Pilate asked them again, "Then what do you want me to do with the one you call the King of the Jews?" Right? He says, hang on. I asked you, do you want me to release the King of the Jews to you? And now the people might have said yes, but you've stirred them up, made me release them first, or him. And I'm only allowed to release one, as do the festival. It says, "Then what do you want me to do with the one you call the King of the Jews?" In 13, it says, again they shouted, "Crucify him." Right? So he asked him, he says, "Okay, you've had me release Barabbas." He said, "But what do you want me to do with Jesus, King of the Jews?" And they shout out, "Crucify him." Now, one thing I want you to see. First off, let's go back to Barabbas. All right, so they requested him, Pilate. Okay, next one, sorry. It says they want him to release Barabbas instead, right? Sometimes in our lives we have a choice. Now Jesus is questioning us, and he's standing on stage, and we're holding captive Jesus, and we're holding captive something in our lives. Now, Jesus asked us to change that, release it, let it go, get rid of it, rid yourself of it. But instead, sometimes we're kind of like the chief priest here. We have envy built up. We have self-ambition that is not of Christ, that is not of Jesus. And Jesus is trying to battle that within us. And here's what we do a lot of times. We say, "Hey, hand over Barabbas instead." You know what? I know I'm a Christian. I know I'm going to heaven. This is the biggest mistake that Christians make today. I know I'm a Christian. I know I'm going to heaven. So therefore, I get to keep what I want. I get to pick and choose. What is best for me? Oh, matter of fact, I said best. What I meant to say was what I think is best for me. Or what I want more than anything. And in that, we tell them to release Barabbas. Now you're like, no, if I was there, I would have been like, oh, let Jesus go. Free. You see those people when their friends go to jail and they have the sign that says free, whatever their friend's name is. Here you'd be like, no, I'd be screaming and shouting that they release Jesus, King of the Jews. But friend, in your own lives today, I promise you that at some point in time you're holding Jesus captive and you're not allowing him to set the stage. Matter of fact, what you're doing is you're holding him and you're releasing Barabbas right here. Now, this is the story of the crucifixion. We know the ending is the resurrection and eternal life for all and the defeat of death. But still, there are times when Jesus is trying to move and we hold him as if he was our prisoner, or we release him, or we release the other. So it says in 13, again they shouted, crucify him. Now another thing I want you to think about. Are you crucifying Jesus today? Now what I mean by that is they shouted, crucify him. Pilate said, why? What has he done wrong? There are times when Jesus doesn't move in the way that we would want him to, or how we see it to be fit. So we're screaming, crucify him. And you're like, no, not me. Once again, you say, if I was there, I definitely would not be screaming, crucify him. But friend, just walk with me just for a moment in our daily lives where we are screaming, crucify him. And you're like, no, not me. Do you remember what he died for, what he was crucified for? But it was not for his own, right? Even Pilate knows. He says, why? What has he done wrong? Friends, there are times when we put Jesus on the cross daily when he chose to go there for us so that neither one of us had to go. He said, but they shouted all the more, crucify him, right? So he says, what has he done wrong? And their answer isn't that he's done anything wrong. Matter of fact, it's quite the opposite. They say, crucify him, right? You know, at a rally, when you get into an argument, I like this. When you get into an argument sometimes, and you know you might even just be wrong. You don't say, well, you know what, you're right. A lot of times we're like, no, we just scream our point even louder as if they hadn't heard us in the first place. They question why we would want to do that in the first place, and our answer is the fact of what we want it done, rather than the reasoning why we want it done. 15, wanting to satisfy the crowd, right? Pilate is a high authority. Wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to him. And after having Jesus flogged, he handed him over to be crucified. He handed him over. So what crown does Jesus wear in your life? That's our next point here. And we're going to lead into this. I love the play on words here that you're about to see. So what crown does Jesus wear in your life? Keep that in mind. 16, it says, the soldiers led him away into the place, that is the governor's, to the palace, that is the governor's residence, and called the whole company together. They dressed him in a purple robe, twisted together a crown of thorns, and put it on him. And they began to salute him. Hail, King of the Jews. Now, when I was walking through making these and questioning what I wanted this point to be, at first it was, are we making fun of Jesus? Are we misrepresenting it? But then I thought, wow, the crown of thorns. The crown of thorns that they laid on Jesus was not a sign that he was a king. Right? The crown of thorns was to put him in a place of, you are nothing. You have nothing. The crown that you wear is one that we put on you. And it is one that would hurt you. Right? That is what they put on him. So every day in my life, this brought me to the point. What crown does Jesus wear in my life? Does he wear the crown of thorns? And you're like, oh no. Someone would be like, well, the crown of thorns is what we remember at the cross. That's not what I remember eternally. I remember my king being crowned. And put it on him, and they began to salute him, Hail, King of the Jews. They're not saying this in a way that they are actually saluting him. They're saying this to make fun of him, to get a rise out of him. 19. They were hitting him in the head with a stick and spitting on him, getting down on their knees, and they were paying him homage. After they had mocked him, they stripped him of the purple robe and put his clothes on him. So here's what I need you to see. What crown is Jesus wearing in your life? Now the point is, right? You're like, oh no, how could they do that to Jesus? When people watch that movie, I can't even think of the name of it right now. Passion of the Christ. Thank you, my audience. The little audience I have here, it does help. The Passion of the Christ. When people watch that and they cry, it's a very emotional movie, and it is absolutely. And it doesn't even come close to what actually happened to Jesus and what he looked like and things like that. But when I think of this, right, and we see this kind of in the movie, they said they were hitting him on the head with a stick and spitting on him. People are like, man, that was my God. How could they do that? And I'm like, man, if you were there, that'd be you. They're like, oh, no, not me. And I'm like, man, you're here. And this is what we do. You know what's even crazier than that? They were spitting on him. You know what we do? We spit in his face. You're like, oh, no, not me. No, absolutely you. I promise you. If you said that's not me, that is you for sure. And you're just in denial. Because I can say that even as a pastor, as a preacher, as a child of Christ, that I do this. I spit in his face. And you're like, oh, man, how could you say that? Well, it's not that I say that. I'm admitting it. I come to a place where I know, not that I'm using it as an excuse that I'm not perfect, but where I'm using it to recognize where I failed. Where I have weakness, that he has strength. I have to recognize that. So they were hitting him on the head with a stick and spitting on him. So what crown does Jesus wear in your life? If Jesus was here to walk today, right? If Jesus in person, in man form, was to walk today with us, would we be hitting him on the head and spitting on him? Getting down on their knees? Or would we be getting down on our knees to pay him respect, right? No homage. After they mocked him, right? They stripped him of his purple robe and put his clothes back on him. I like that. They wouldn't even let him dye the purple robes that they were making fun of him in. They put his clothes back on him. Right? They took these clothes off, put on the robe to make fun of him. They crowned him with the crown of thorns, and they're spitting on him, hitting him in the head, getting down on their knees to mock him in a way that, oh, you're so mighty, look at you now, right? The modern world today, right? They're able to do this. They're able to mock Jesus. But is it because they don't understand? Or is it because we've forgotten? Right? If I'm part of the mocking and I'm a follower of Christ, then how could I expect the world not to mock him? How could I expect the world to understand that he is a king much greater than any purple robe or any crown that they could ever put on him, if I don't understand it myself? So what crown are we putting on him? They led him out to crucify him. So they mock him, and they're trying to get a rise out of him, trying to, if he was the king. It's kind of like they really kind of wanted to see if he was the king, right? Because obviously if he was the king, he would pull himself out of the situation. So you would think. So then they're like, all right, we've done enough. Let's go crucify him. Take off his robe, put on his clothes. They keep the thorn on him. So they forced a man coming into the country who was passing by to carry Jesus' cross. He was Simon of Cyrene, the father of Alexander Rufus. They brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull. They tried to give him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. Now this is kind of cool to see that they had given him wine as if they were trying to be nice, is what you're thinking. You're like, why didn't he take it? Well, they mixed it with myrrh. And myrrh is something they used as perfume back in the day. And if anybody offered me a glass of anything, right, a glass of water, if it was scented, and also within that I knew what was scented with, then I definitely would not drink it, because cologne does not taste good, right? You all know somebody that on Sunday morning wears too much cologne. And you just walk by them and you get it in your mouth and you're like, wow, that's too much, right? That's what the wine would have tasted like. And it's not a great thing. 24, then they crucified him. And wait, no, I got to go back real quick. Hang on. So they offered him this as if it was the best they had, right? But they knew. This is where I was talking about that we spit in Jesus' face. They knew that wasn't the best. They were doing it to mock Jesus. What are you offering, Jesus? are times in my life when I'm offering wine with myrrh in it, and I know it's in there. And I'm offering it as if he should drink that because he's thirsty. Rather than, Jesus, drink this because it's the best I have. Right? So I had to go back to that. 24. Then they crucified him and divided his clothes. Right? As if it wasn't bad enough for someone to be crucified, then they start dividing his clothes before he's even dead. So that they would know, we have this, right? Casting lots for them to decide what each would get. Now it was 9 in the morning when they crucified him. The inscription of the charge written against him was the King of the Jews. Back when they would crucify people, they would put you on the cross, and on the cross they would have your charge written. So that anybody walking by, anybody that was there, that did not know why you were being crucified, they would know by the charge written. Jesus' charge was being King of the Jews. Kind of crazy. And then you're like, wow, it's crazy they killed him for being the King of the Jews. It's crazy. But friends, isn't it crazy that we know what happens after death? And that we still choose to crucify him? You're like, no, I don't choose to crucify him. But you do, friend. See, you kill off every little bit of Jesus that we have in us each day. Whether it be, we're supposed to show kindness no matter what. We get upset. It's understanding. That's understandable. But what's not understandable is our actions. What's not understandable is that we're worried more about a pandemic that is going around that, you're right, we've never seen before, so we don't know the outcome, but we never would have known the outcome. Right? Think about the things that we do know the outcome of. I know that if someone finds Christ, right, and they turn their lives over to him, they have an eternity in heaven. I know that. But I don't know what's going to happen with the pandemic. I know it's going to kill a lot of people because it already has. So wouldn't that make me want even more to spread the word of Jesus rather than the statistics of the pandemic? So the charge against him was being King of the Jews. They crucified 2 criminals with him, one on his right and one on his left. So Jesus is the middle cross. It brings us to our third point, which is questioning God's plan. Now, we do this all the time. We can all admit to that, right? There are things that happen where, like, the biggest thing that we question, though, is God's plan in general. That we don't know God's plan, so therefore we question it. We hate not being in control, rather than being used. In 29, it says, those who passed by were yelling insults at him, shaking their heads, and saying, ha, the one who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. I like that, don't you? Because you know what comes in 3 days. Save yourselves by coming down from the cross. In the same way, the chief priests and the scribes were mocking him against themselves, saying, he saved others, but he cannot save himself. It's crazy because they knew the testimonies. They knew he had saved others. He brought people back to life. He had made the lame walk, the blind see. All these things that he they knew he had saved others, cast demons out of people. But he cannot save himself. They said that as to mock him, as to where, here's what's crazy. This is everybody questioning God's plan. Right? Because had they known that they were actually playing part in God's plan, they wouldn't have wanted it, right? Because they didn't want God to be glorified. They wanted to be glorified. They wanted to be put back on their high thrones. Rather, Jesus came to destroy the temple and rebuild it. Rebuild it, not to come to take it away, but to fulfill the law. We forget that. We forget that today, or Revelation was wrote, so that we would know there's a time coming when Jesus shall return. These guys knew from the testimony that he had saved people and that he would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. They hadn't yet understood that. I don't think we yet understand that. We're like, well, yeah, we do. He died, 3 days later was resurrected. Oh, do you understand that the temple, it was destroyed in the fact that Jesus was crucified? But what all he had taken on was why it was like that. And why it was rebuilt in 3 days? Well, the resurrection. But it was the fact that Jesus had defeated death. So save yourselves by coming down from the cross. In the same way, the chief priests, everybody everybody was mocking him in different ways and all the different things that were happening. In 32, it says, let the Messiah, and this is probably my favorite verse out of this whole thing. Let the Messiah, the King of Israel, come down now from the cross so that we may see and believe. Even those who were crucified with him taunted him. Every day in my life, I say this phrase. You're like, no, that's bold. No, every day in my life, I question God's plan. I'm like, God, listen. If this is what you want me to do, then I'm going to need you to come off the cross, and I'm going to need to see it and believe rather than live by faith, which is the fact that he had already conquered by going to the cross, by choosing to go to the cross, and then being resurrected. I forget that. But every day I question. I'm like, God, just show me. I'd rather you just come down and do it for me, and then I'll believe. Rather than, God, please use me in a way that everybody would believe. Even those that were crucified with him taunted him. Friends, point number 4, which is a just God. Now this is my favorite part to explain. And I'm probably going to mispronounce some words coming up. But that's okay. We'll get through this together. Right? If you need me to mispronounce it, or you're like, oh my gosh, you can't listen to this guy, he's mispronouncing words. I'm sorry, but I speak English, and I'm from Magazine, okay? It's right next to Sugar Grove. If you know that, you understand now that I probably can't speak Greek, okay? It says, when it was noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And at 3, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. Yeah, that word's kind of hard, okay? And I had gone over it time and time again before this. So I want you to know, this is not lack of effort that I cannot say that. It's a lack of speaking in tongues, okay? No, I really I cannot say the word. I've tried several times. I got it wrong several times. So I figured it's just best to go ahead and, which is translated, my God, why have you abandoned me? Now this is my favorite thing to explain because this is the number one question that I get. Everybody's like, man, I believe in the Bible, I believe in God, but there's this one part that I trip up on. I'm like, okay, what's that? And I always know that this is coming. Like, when Jesus was on the cross, he asked God, my God, why have you abandoned me? He asked God, why has he abandoned me? Now, I need to remind you a couple things. In the Bible, it says that God cannot look upon sin. Okay, that's the number one thing I need to remind you. The second part is, my God, right? Let's go back to the first point, is a just God. My God is a just God. Jesus didn't deserve death. Right? So when Jesus decided he was going to take sin upon him, first off, God cannot look upon sin. So they had this connection, this straight connection the whole time, because he was perfect. He had a perfect connection with God. The moment he chose to take on a man's sin, then God had to look away. But also, though, as I was reading this again, I noticed one thing. When I say my God is a just God, that would mean if my God was to watch this, he would have to save Jesus. Want to know why he'd have to save Jesus? Because my God is a just God, knows that that Jesus did not deserve the death, did not deserve to die. So the longer God was watching Jesus on the cross, because they say everything that happened up to Jesus' last breath, before that though, a regular man would have died hours and hours and hours before Jesus died, all the things they had done to him. God kept watching to the point where he had to turn away for his will to be done. Jesus accepted that role, and he does cry out, my God, why have you abandoned me? Now there's a couple things. First off, Jesus took the role of a human. So in this moment, when he no longer has that connection that is perfect with God, he notices a void. I want you to ask yourself something. If you had such a great... Matter of fact, in our lives, we have this connection. A lot of times it happens right after salvation. We have this flame they talk about. Flame, and it's burning so wildly. But think about the rededications, all these things that happen where we have a connection, such a great connection with God, and his will in our life is so drawn out. Right? And it seems to be everybody says, man, I can remember this time when I was so close to God, but this happened and I fell away. And I remember Jesus had the perfect relationship with God. And the moment he chose to fulfill God's will, he cries out, why have you abandoned me? Not because God had abandoned him, but because God had to look away for God's will to be done. Understanding the crucifixion is hard at times. Understanding this part is extremely, it doesn't make sense to some people. But I know the things that add up to this, the reasons. This was not a cry for help. See, that's what our problem is. When we think God has abandoned us, it's a cry out to He needs to move now. When Jesus says this, it's a call to His will. Right? It's a cry out saying, my God, why have you abandoned me? He knows that God's will is in this. So it continues. 35, it says, when some of those standing there heard this, they said, see, he's calling for Elijah. And I like this. He's calling for Elijah. This is what happens a lot of times in Christians. When we're questioned about our Christianity or spirituality, we have parts that we call on God, or we ask things of God, but we don't do it in a manner whereas someone would know who we were asking for. That was just a little side note. That sometimes, you know what, your testimony, no, not a side note. This needs to be a bold note. That in your life, someone ought to be able to look at you by your testimony and know exactly where your faith falls. Right? Not that you would have the strongest faith, but that they would know exactly where you turn when things get tough. Right now, America, I have no idea where you're turning. And I can imagine Jesus is probably looking at us going, my people, why have you abandoned me? It's crazy. But remember, he used that for God's will. On God's will. See, he's calling for Elijah. Some ran and filled a sponge with sour wine. Nasty, right? Fixed it on a stick, offered him a drink, and said, let's see if Elijah comes to take him down, right? So had they not seen enough yet, they were like, hey, let's taunt him some more. He's about dead, and he's crying out for Elijah because they didn't even understand. They didn't even understand what he was talking about. So they run, they get a sour wine. They're like, here, drink this, man. Elijah, let's see if Elijah comes. Brings us to our last point, which is a breath of understanding. And this is probably the most important one, because this is kind of where I'd like us to be. Leading up to Easter, I wish that we would just have a breath of understanding. 37, Jesus let out a loud cry and breathed his last. Then the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. When the centurion, who was standing opposite him, saw the way he breathed his last, he said, truly, this man was the Son of God. Through Jesus taking his last breath, the man recognizes this is truly the Son of God. In our lives, whatever the story is, however we came to God, there's a point in our life where we know truly I've felt the presence of the Son of God. I think we've fallen away from that. And then even worse than that, how can I expect a revival of America when I'm not having a revival in my own life? There was a moment when you said, truly, this man was the Son of God. Go back to that moment. Think back. Think back to that time in your life, whether it was a hard time, whether life was great, and then you had an experience that just turned you that way. Whatever it was, just remember there was hope in that situation. There are times we question God, and that's okay. They did. They beat him, crucified him, they spit on him. But friends, we're spitting in his face. We're spitting in his face because he's done so much already. And yet we may believe that He is the Son of God, but we sure don't act it. When I say that, what I mean is our testimony sure doesn't represent it. So if you don't know Jesus Christ, I want to invite you today to say this prayer with me. And if you have a fear of what eternity holds, then say this prayer with me. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this day, Lord. I thank you for sending your Son, Jesus, Lord. And I know he was your Son. He was your Son, Lord. You sent him to earth and he lived a perfect life. Lord, when we crucified him, he died for my sins, Lord. And then he was resurrected, and one day he will return. Lord, he beat death so that I could have eternal life. Lord, and I pray that you would be the King of my heart. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. If that was you, then friend, I'm excited to tell you that you now have truly met the Son of Man, or the Son of God. Now another thing, though, goes to the church. Once again, every week we have a challenge, and I hate stepping on your toes. But every week when I read the Word of God and then I see what's happening around me, it just inspires me. It inspires me because I know we're failing. Last week I talked about the church being ashamed. This week, it's the same thing. We're ashamed. Here's the thing. If you're a Christian, you're living in fear today, that's not the faith. That's not the hope. And that's not the crucifixion that I read about. That I know lives. I know lives a story in a Holy Bible that speaks of fearless men and women all throughout it. All because they had faith in Jesus Christ. So if you're living in fear today, then I got to ask you the tough question. Where's your faith? Let's go ahead and set the stage for God's movement so that we could be a part of it, so that we could see the things that we say we see, that we wish. Oh boy, I wish there was a revival in my hometown, and friend, be a part of it. The revival starts with you, and it starts within you. So I'm going to pray. I hope this video has encouraged you, but not only encouraged you. What I pray for most is that this video has pushed you, that is called to light in the shadows, that there's something that I'm holding on to that I would release it. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you for this day. I thank you for the people that are watching this. Lord, I thank you for the people that are here with me. Lord, I thank you for your Son. Lord, I thank you that you could use us in your will. Lord, I pray that if we live in fear today, Lord, that we would turn that over right now within this video, Lord. We would say this prayer together, Lord. I pray that we would turn every fear that we have over to you right now. Lord, and that we would walk fearless in the world, not without responsibility, but bold in our faith. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Hang on. I'd also like to remind you that if you have tithes or you would like to donate, you can take your donations by First Western Bank in Booneville and tell them to put them in Victory Baptist Church account. And they'll give you a slip. You hold on to that slip and get it to our secretary, and she'll make sure those are put for your end of year taxes. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.